My name is Jim McGreevy, and I have the pleasure and the distinction of being able to work for the great mayor of Jersey City, Mayor Stephen Fulop. The focus today is the prisoner's story, so that we all have a story in our lives. I know I have a story. Some of you might have heard of it. But as the old spiritual says, we all fall down, but we all get up. And so, when we recognize that America is only 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated population, when we recognize that our country is spending $74 billion annually to lock people up, to incarcerate them, we clearly need to do better. And that is the focus of Mayor Fulop's Reentry program. And so what we'd like to do here today with, I believe, is a great panel that's going to be moderated by my friend Eric, is to talk about how the circumstances of a child's life can help bring them to prison. The second panel will be talking about the prison experience, and the third panel will be talking about reentry. So again, today, this is the prisoner's story. How upbringing can actually increase the propensity towards prison, the impact of prison upon oneself and one's family and one community, and thirdly, reentry as a gateway to the promised land. And Gene Kornacki, I'd like to thank, who's our host today, President Kornacki of St. Peter's University. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I also thank you to the Jesuit community for their commitment, as Pope Francis has, to this issue. And now it's my great honor to introduce Bob Budsock, who's our partner with Integrity House. Integrity House is our provider who works with us both in Hudson County Jail under the great able leadership of Director Oscar Aviles, as well as Frank Mazza. And they will also work with us at Martin's Place, which is our home, thanks to the leadership of Mayor Fulop. I'd like to present President of Integrity House, Mr. Robert Budsock.
Thank you, Jim. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the second annual Prisoner Reentry Conference, hosted by Mayor Stephen Fulop. Integrity House is proud to be a co-sponsor for this conference, along with Jersey City Employment and Training Program, Jersey City Medical Center, the New Jersey Association of Mental Health and Addictions Agencies, and most importantly, St. Peter's University. The topic of prisoner reentry has always been core to the Integrity House mission. We were founded in 1968 by a parole officer named Dave Kerr, and he had a vision of breaking the cycle of recidivism by providing addiction treatment along with housing and employment services. Today, the mission of Integrity House remains the same. We provide opportunities for individuals to reclaim their lives. Those in attendance today are part of a movement to reform our criminal justice system through partnership and collaboration. Integrity House is a small part of a Hudson County reintegration program that was founded through the vision of County Executive Tom DeGise and the Director of Corrections, Oscar Aviles. Research has proven that a well-coordinated effort of prisoner reentry is cost-effective, and it restores lives, families, and communities. The Casa Columbia study, which is called Behind Bars 2, states that of the 2.3 million inmates crowding our nation's prisons and jails, 85% were substance involved. The report also found that only 11% of all inmates with addiction received any treatment during their incarceration. The report concluded that we must use trained professionals to screen, assess, and treat substance-involved offenders. We must provide care for co-occurring mental health problems. We must, most importantly, provide comprehensive pre-release planning and aftercare. A demonstration of that effort is the Hudson County Reintegration Program. While it costs upwards of $50,000 a year to incarcerate an individual, the cost of treating an addict offender is far less, and the results are much more promising. In Hudson County, where we once saw a recidivism rate close to the national average of 70% rearrested within 3 years of release, through a well-coordinated reintegration efforts, we see the recidivism rate for those that are receiving treatment, pre-release planning, and aftercare, that rate has dropped below 25%. Our goal today is to raise awareness of the evidence, thank you, yes, for Hudson County. Our goal today is to raise awareness of evidence-based solutions that will reform our criminal justice system. And it's with great enthusiasm that I introduce the facilitator of our first panel, not yet, Jim McGreevy.
Thank you.
It's with great enthusiasm that I introduce my good friend and someone who has single-handedly brought like an unprecedented awareness to the issue of prisoner reentry in New Jersey, Governor Jim McGreevy.
Oh, Lord. Thank you. Thanks, Robert. We just thought it was important, obviously, to embrace Integrity House as our partner. And now I'd like to introduce somebody who's, you know, in every movement, there's an intellectual engine. In every movement, there's a visionary. When you look to the Hebrew Bible and the prophet Jeremiah, somebody who calls out in the wilderness and asks us to be a better people. On this issue, nationally, Chris Hedges has been that voice in the wilderness for so long. He's a former New York Times reporter. He's an ordained minister from Harvard Divinity School. I guess he couldn't get into general seminary. And he's a Presbyterian. But on a serious note, somebody who's powerful, who speaks truth to justice, and we are very much honored to have with him here today. In fact, he's on his way to Greensboro to preach the gospel. Somebody I'd like us all to lift up and to acknowledge his contribution, Chris Hedges.
Thank you, Governor. And I know there are many people in this room who have dedicated their lives to reforming and confronting a system that I think most of us would accept is terribly broken. I spent 20 years overseas, came back to the United States, mostly covering war. I covered the war in El Salvador, 7 years in the Middle East, war in the former Yugoslavia. My last assignment was covering al-Qaeda, based in Paris, and stumbled into this issue with a friend of mine who is the head of the history department at the College of New Jersey, and she was teaching at Bordentown in Wagner without any kind of support and trying to get people to come in and teach, and we started teaching semester-long courses. And in those days, there was no STEP program. We were buying the books ourselves, printing out certificates. And it was, many of you, of course, understand the talent that unfortunately is locked behind bars throughout this country. But it was very eye-opening to me to see the level of intellectual depth, integrity, even wisdom. And I haven't stopped. I teach in the STEP program now in Rahway, and every semester we teach something different. And I think it has given me an appreciation for what many of you do. I know some of you work in the Department of Corrections, and I've certainly run into all sorts of people who I think care deeply and would like to make this system work. One of the things that has been distressing for me, and as the governor said, I am an ordained Presbyterian minister and have been working out of a Church of Elizabeth, is the impact that mass incarceration has upon families, and in particular, children. And we have been running out of a church in Elizabeth support groups. In fact, on Saturday in Newark at 10 o'clock at the Elmwood Presbyterian Church at 377 Clinton Avenue, we're having our first meeting of families of the mass incarcerated. So any of you who have contacts with families, please let them know. Many of you who are members of church communities understand that when family members have someone who is behind bars, they often will not tell even people within their church community. And that's a kind of stigma that we would like to lift. We would like to build relationships. Families of those who are incarcerated are in many ways incarcerated themselves. The infliction upon children, I think, is particularly difficult and painful. One of the issues that I just want to raise up, and I know some of you are aware of it, is the increasing financial burden that is being placed on families, and we are seeing year after year how this burden is increasing. There are 22 fines, first of all, when you're sentenced in the state of New Jersey. These fines total in the thousands of dollars. Most people behind bars are earning about $28 a month, which means that paying off these fines takes years. We are seeing now people actually finish prison terms in debt. We have all sorts of charges that happen within the system itself. Bereavement visits can run close to $1,000 for a 15-minute visit with somebody who is a family member of the immediate family who is either on a deathbed visit or a viewing. Medical charges, there's less provided now for people. For instance, shoes are not provided. So if you buy a pair of Reebok sneakers, that's $45. All of this stuff begins to mount up. The wages have not changed, and yet commissary prices have risen tremendously. And I got a list of the 1996 commissary prices in New Jersey, and when, again, prisoners were earning $28 a month, and the commissary prices today, and compared them. And we're talking about the most basic items. So, for instance, a bar of Dove soap in 1996 cost 97 cents. Today it costs $1.95. That's an increase of 101%. Toothpaste, $2.35 in 1996, $3.49 today, a 48% increase. AA batteries have risen by 184%, a stick of deodorant by 95%. And along with this, and these, of course, because the commissary have been privatized, these are corporations that go into the prisons, like Aramark, like the food service, and they go in to make a profit. And they have a captive market. If you buy 100 letter-size envelopes in Staples, it'll cost you $7. If you buy them in the prison system, it's 15 cents an envelope, which is $15. That's over 100% markup. The phone issue has become a burden on families, tremendous burden on families. They have to pay in advance into the phone. They have to pay surcharges. They pay higher phone rates than we pay for in-state calls, significantly higher. And for many of these families, and I think, one of the things that we all want to do is we know that those who are incarcerated who maintain relationships with their families are able to integrate far more easily back into the community in reentry, and that lifeline between children in particular and parents is hurt. J-Pay now is a privatized system by which you put money in, again, those surcharges. So what I'm seeing with the families is that the burden, they can no longer send packages. They used to be able to send packages in, that the financial costs are becoming extremely difficult, especially for long-term people who have family members who are incarcerated for long periods of time. So I want to hold that up. I know it's something that the families, and this is something we will be talking about on Saturday. It's something the families, we would like to mobilize the families to begin to address issues like the phone rates, address issues like the commissary prices, address issues like the ability to reinstate the system by which packages can be sent to those who are incarcerated. And just from a religious perspective, which I know the governor and I and many others in this room come out of, and out of the church community, it is just not acceptable for those of us who come out of the gospel of Jesus Christ to exploit and prey upon the most vulnerable. That this is not a political issue. This is a moral and a religious issue. And we, as a society, are judged by our capacity to take care of the vulnerable among us. The STEP program, which I teach in, I think is making a tremendous difference, and I know that it has support all the way up to Governor Christie. It's made a tremendous difference in the lives of my students, who I treat as students. I have taught at Princeton, I have taught at Columbia, I have taught at New York University, and in any class, I usually have about 28 or 30 students. I have a core of students who could easily do the academic work at Princeton. And they made mistakes, sometimes very egregious mistakes. But again, coming out of the Christian church, I believe in the power of transformation. I believe that people can be reformed. I believe that people should be forgiven and that we as a society should forgive them. And I see in that classroom people struggling to remake themselves and redefine themselves as human beings. And many times I find that very, very moving. I don't need to tell you the court system doesn't work. I have one student, just as an example, from Camden, 14 years old. He's picked up, he's in a gang, there was a knifing, there was a woman who was killed. He was not allowed to see his family. He signed a confession, 2 in the morning. They said he could go home. He's put on the top of Camden County Jail for 2 years, goes to trial at 16. He's not eligible to go before a parole board till he's 70. And to judge, he has no money, he has no lawyer. He's my best student. He was the only, I don't treat him any different than Princeton. I only gave 1 A+ last fall. I'm kind of ruthless, but he got it. And at the class, he said to me, well, I'm probably going to die in this prison, but I work so hard because I'm going to be a teacher like you. And when you see that kind of integrity and that kind of work and that kind of commitment, and you see how we have essentially cast these people aside, largely invisible, not to you, but I think to the wider society, it's heartbreaking. I will just close by talking about every semester I teach something different. It's more work for me, but it's more interesting. And I taught drama a year ago fall in Rahway. So we read August Wilson and the great Amira Baraka and James Baldwin. And as an experiment, I said, I was supposed to be writing my own book at the time, so I go once a week. And I said, well, why don't you write scenes, and that's your assignment. Every week you have to write a scene. And so as all of you, many of you know, prison always has that peculiar smell, so I bring the papers out, and that's kind of musty smell of Rahway. And I'm looking through the scenes, and I hit one that's gold, and then I hit another one. And I had attracted 4 or 5 of the best writers in the prison, largely because they all listened to WBAI and they knew who I was, and they knew I was a writer. And I did this another week, and I suddenly thought, maybe there's something here. So I added another night every week. I dropped my book. I didn't tell my publisher. And all I did all fall was hammer those scenes into a play. It was all autobiographical. And we had a reading of the play. I brought in Cornel West and the great theologian James Cone to be our audience. But the heartbreak that was expressed in that play and the humanity that was expressed in that play I'll just give you a quick example. I had one student, I said, okay, your assignment next week is to write a conversation about you and your mother. Just you and your mother. I don't want any drama. I don't want drugs on the street. I just want a conversation. And so one of my students said, well, what if we're a product of rape? And I said, well, that's what you have to write. And this ended up being put in the play, and it was autobiographical. And he was picked up on a weapons possession with his half-brother, and the weapon was not his. It was his half-brother's, but he took ownership of it to take the hit for his half-brother. And it's the phone conversation that he had with his mother from jail saying, it doesn't matter, Ma, I was never supposed to be here anyway. You have the son you love. Yeah, that's why he's in prison. And when he read, he had never expressed it. He had never spoken about the stigma of being a product of rape. And he got up and read this. And then I asked where he is, and they said he's in the bathroom. And I went, all they do in Rahway is lift weights. So I feel like one of the munchkins, and like, you know, they're all like 300 pounds of, and I found him, you know, weeping and shaking over in the corner. And these stories are not stories that you are unfamiliar with. Many of you, I know your heart is as broken as mine. And I applaud Governor McGreevey, and I applaud you for being here today. We have to take this system, which is utterly dysfunctional, and make it functional. We have to rescue these families. We have to rescue those who are behind bars. We have to think in terms of reform, and it's a huge and momentous task before us, but I would argue that it is probably maybe the greatest civil rights issue of our time. Thank you very much. Well, the governor asked me to just speak briefly about the next steps for the movement. I think we have to mobilize. Unfortunately, we live in a system whereby corporate money has largely replaced the vote. Corporate lobbyists write legislation. We have all sorts of corporate interests that have a vested interest in keeping this system going because they make a lot of money off it, whether it's private prisons, whether it's phone card companies, or whatever. I think that we have to make our voices heard. I think there are all sorts of issues around fair pay in prison, $1.30 a day. I mean, you have people, Earl Amin, who I just saw, just got out 8 months ago, 34 years in prison for conspiracy. He was a Black Panther in Newark, and he discussed the possibility of robbing a bank with an informant. He never robbed a bank. He got 34 years. I mean, this is nuts. And he gets out. He's a paralegal. He works for 34 years, 8 hours a day, and he's $5,000 in debt. He has no Social Security. He's working 2 days a week doing construction. These people have to get out and have both a financial structure and a physical structure, which I know the governor is attempting to create, whereby they can re-enter. And I've got one of my students is getting out on the 28th after 11 years in prison, and he's going to sleep on his sister's couch. That gets really old really fast for him and his sister. And as you know, there's just so much stacked against them. And I think that trusting kind of naively in the legislative process to reform itself at this point isn't going to work. I think we have to get out on the street. Michelle Alexander is saying this, who I admire very much. And I think that we have to, this is why we are having that meeting in Newark with the families, and we are trying to build relationships with faith-based groups throughout the state, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, so that we can begin to raise up these voices, raise up these issues. And I really think that it calls for the kind of mass organization and even acts of civil disobedience that will begin to put pressure on the system. Because if we don't begin to put that pressure on the system will do what it is already doing, which is every year financially and in many other ways exploiting the most vulnerable among us. You know, Michelle Alexander said everybody should go to trial because the whole system would collapse. 94% of people plea out. So I think we have to begin to create mass movements and organizations that put pressure in order to create change. I think waiting for a bill to go through the Senate, it isn't going to work. Thank you.
And today, as we talk about the prisoner's story, we think about how grace leads us home. And for those of us who value the lesson of recovery, it's that third step, particularly to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. And so in that sense, I want to thank all of our speakers today, all of our moderators, all of our supporters. But none of this would have been possible without the leadership of a mayor who believed in reentry. And I remember some time when we presented the idea of Martin's Place, named after the late, great Reverend Martin Luther King, and people struggled with the idea of reentry. And I think, thankfully, our country as a community now understands that the damage that we do through incarceration actually makes people worse, and that it is an expensive failure that costs not only in terms of dollars, but in human life. And so I'm grateful every day of my life to be able to serve great women and men of integrity that are trying to do the next right thing. And I am so grateful because I believe I've found grace in my life. But that would not have been happened had it not been for our mayor, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing to some, presenting to others, the mayor of the great city of Jersey City, Stephen Fulop.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me start by just saying that the last 2 years in this job has been amongst the most rewarding thing that I could have asked for in my life. And this particular conference, the second year that we're here, is a byproduct of a small conversation that I had 2.5 years ago during a campaign, thinking that reentry was important to the employment part. And I reached out to Governor McGreevey. He was working in the jail here in Hudson County. It was difficult to get on his calendar. We met at a diner close to the jail, and we started a conversation on this. And one thing led to another, and I started to think that the best person to run a reentry program that would be a model for the entire country, I thought would be Governor McGreevey. And I tell you, at the time, many people told me that it's probably a mistake to hire a former politician, let alone a governor. You're trying to change or reform Jersey City's image. You probably don't want anybody who's been in elected office before. And after talking to him and how passionate he was about this aspect of society, I couldn't help but think that this was something that we had to do. And I could tell you today, 2.5 years later, after that conversation, that probably one of the best hires I ever made was Jim McGreevey. And yeah. I mean, you're all here, and you all know him personally. The energy that he brings to this, the excitement. I mean, I hear about it every time he places somebody in a job because he really does care. And it's really about human beings and second chances, and it really is special work that they're doing at Martin's Place. And I would say to you that the 500 or 600 of you that are in this room right now, and there are people in another room, overflow room, watching it on a television simulcast there, I would just tell you that if you haven't been to Martin's Place yet, you should take time out of your calendar, reach out to somebody who is one of our employees there. If Jim can't do it himself, come visit and see the work that they're doing, because you will be inspired about what they're doing and the opportunities there. And I just want to extend that invitation to all of you. And so with that said, I have the privilege of introducing our first keynote speaker for lunch. And you know, some of you may think, Mike Tyson, what's his bond to Jersey City? Why would we ask Mike Tyson to be our keynote speaker here? And I tell you, I first had the chance to meet Mike Tyson 2 years ago after being elected. I ran into him when he was with Mario at the White Mana. And I was on a way to a senior event in the Heights. And we got into a conversation, and I told him where I was going. I was newly elected. And Mario said, me and Mike would like to visit the seniors as well. We'll stop by as soon as we're done with lunch. And I said, sure you will. whatever, you know? And I left and I didn't think anything of it. And a half hour later, they came in to the senior center and they spent 45 minutes with the seniors, making them smile, just doing terrific work there. And I was really inspired by the fact that you took time out of your calendar and you really followed through on something that you said. That said, you know, when you talk about the panels this morning, we talked about tough childhoods and the impact on that. We talk about addiction situations. We talk about second chances. And when you look through the context of those three components, there probably is nobody who's more fitting to discuss the heights of life and really what it's like to be in the depths of defeat than our keynote speaker at lunch, Mike Tyson. And so with that said, I hope that you could give him a warm Jersey City welcome as we invite him to the stage, the former world heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson.
All right, let's hear it. Mike, 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 Mike. Come on, let's give it up, Jersey City.
Wow, this is pretty interesting. I just found out 5 minutes ago I'm the keynote speaker. So I'm up here to tell you about me and who I am, I guess. Most of the people here seem either close to 30 or over 30, so they pretty much have an idea, but the man doesn't know. Okay, so I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York. And this is really interesting because my mother and father, besides them being educated people, they were involved with I have to find the right political word for it, the sex industry. They sold and sold women and stuff, and I was a product of that. I seen that every time. I seen my mother doing tricks and getting paid, and so that's the world I pretty much knew. And I'm horrible in relationships. You would think I'm great, right? But I mean, I suck in relationships like that. But no, I come from that kind of world where everything was dog eat dog. If you had money, if you had jewelry, and if you couldn't defend your stuff or protect it, you were getting taken. You were going to get killed. And all my life I've seen murders and robberies, and I became a part of that. And I took the choice to become a part of it because when you think about it, I have a brother who's like one of the top trauma surgeons in the country. I had a sister that was a teacher before she passed. And so I come from a very educated background. I never passed the 9th grade because I was just so entrenched into the street world. I was just really allured to that. That was really what I wanted to be because you saw instant gratification as far as respect was concerned in the street world. I didn't have much patience, and that's what I wanted. So I started getting involved with crime at a young age. My first arrest, I guess I was, 10 years old, my first arrest, pickpocket, jostling. And so when I went to the institution, I realized I'm in this reform. All my friends are here. Everybody that saw me in the streets, pickpocketing, other guys from different boroughs, and I got addicted to it even more. So I wasn't afraid to go to jail anymore. And so I became a more advanced criminal, so to speak. I remember one day we were in a house, we were robbing somebody's house, and I thought I was talking to my friend, somebody was whispering, I thought I was talking to my friend, and it was someone else in the house. And I thought I was talking to my friend. So as I told him I heard somebody, we both were leaving the house, and my friend who thinks he's a professional, he tried to lock the door, but the guy came, opened the door, and blew his brains out right there. Yeah, and I ran. I was 12. He must have been 14. I ran. Because that's what you do. You try to get away. And I ran. And you would think that God, that would just send somebody straight. That same that me and my other friends, we hooked up a little bit later. Let's get another house. And that's just what it was. This is how we lived our life. Most of my friends are pretty much dead. Else they got so much time. I'm going to visit some guys tomorrow. And they got caught under this Rockefeller law. They got 240 years. One of my friends got 5 life sentences. He's only 50. And so these are the people that I go and see once a month, sometimes twice a month, because these are my friends. These are who we grew up. These are the guys I stayed over their house when my mother was doing what she was doing. This is just these are my family, and that's what I do. I go see all my friends. And they'll be so intrigued to know I'm at this particular type of event talking about the situation when we were talking about, I was hearing them talking about these hard laws and helping people when they get out. It's going to be a real neat trick to do that, because those laws was the guidelines to put them in there for a long time, because the people don't want them to ever come out and still get the $60,000 from them, or us, so to speak. So yeah, I'm one of those guys. So I went away in this other prison institution, and it's called Tryon. So I'm in Tryon, and I'm kind of like a badass guy. So somebody said something, or he pulled at my hat, so I stabbed some guy, and I went to another correction. Then I went there. I got introduced to a gentleman by the name of Bobby Student. He started teaching me how to box, because I thought I was a tough guy. I didn't know anything about being a tough guy, but I thought I was. And so I went there, and it was so ironic. He didn't want me to go, because I kept improving. I broke his nose, and he was a professional fighter, and I'm 12 years old. And so I had this miraculous, this was just such an opportunity. I met a gentleman by the name of Customato, an old Italian man. And when I went there, he talked to me. He talked to me for 2 weeks. He just talked to me. I thought he was a pervert, because he was saying all these things that I'm beautiful and I can do this. But when I sparred, I was getting shellacked. So I knew it was no way that he would think that I was a good fighter. But he saw something that I still don't see what he saw to this day. I don't know how it worked. And he said that I was going to be champ, I was going to do all this stuff. And that's what made me think this is a perv. Because where I come from, everybody's trying to, it's a perv. I live in Perv City. Everybody's trying to do this. No, this is real talk, though. I'm talking to you, man. I started listening to this Italian guy, and he teaches me to fight. And I'm 14 years old. I win this national championship. Then I win this junior national championship. I'm breaking record. I knock a guy out in 8 seconds. How did that happen? And he still told me I was imperfect. I was wrong. I was flawed. So I didn't know how that worked, and I just started listening to him. I said, when I went back home, I was getting ready to do some more robberies, because every now and then I would go back to Brooklyn and do robberies and come back, because the state was paying them like $150 a month, and that wasn't even paying for my pants and my sneakers. So I always went back home and did robberies and came back with nice clothes and told them that my friends gave me these clothes because their older brother can't fit them anymore, something like that, some ridiculous story. And one day when we were going to do another robbery, a friend of mine was telling me, no, you're with those white people, Mike. Stay with them. These people love you, Mike. I saw you win this champion. They love you. So my friend had told me that me and him was together one day. We went by a dice game, and we know these guys. These are our friends, guys we grew up with. But something was different. I saw them when we looked at the dice game. We didn't gamble, but they looked at each other. No one said hi. I said, what's up? Everybody said hi to me, but they didn't talk to him. And so we left, and a week later they told me that they killed them. And so and my friend saw me and said, Mike, man, you walked off the game with him. I thought that you were killed too. Because I didn't know these guys were having this little secret war, because I was just coming back and forth. I didn't know the information. And so ever since my friend died, I stayed up there, and I never came back, and I became successful. And I became champion at 20 years old, the youngest champion ever. I won titles. I had everything in the world, but I still had that darkness in me. I had hundreds of millions, I had money, but I still had that darkness in me. That darkness wasn't out of me yet. And I got in a whole bunch of trouble. I got involved with people who had made me no good. And I lost a lot of money. I kept getting lawsuits. Lawsuits this, lawsuit here, lawsuit here. And most of my money I tricked off on lawsuits. You know what I mean? You could listen. If I spend $250 million on girls and trips and clothes, that's nothing to what I did on lawsuits, okay? So they really got me good with those lawsuits, but I still didn't have peace. I still had that old darkness from back before. And then because, of course, my father and mother, they're addicts, and I'm not fighting anymore, and I have nothing to do, why not I become an addict? Because that's just how it goes, right? So I become this addict now, because I always drank my whole life, never stopped drinking. And I became this addict. I've been getting in a lot of trouble. What happened? I had some kids from being an addict. I had married some people during my addict stage. And, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So listen, and so I started going through this process of I'm clean clean. So I get clean for a year. I get clean for 5 years, but then I relapse. And the reason why I relapsed because I didn't have I didn't have a spiritual awakening. I just wasn't using drugs. I wasn't sober. I just wasn't using drugs and liquor. I just wasn't using. I was miserable, right? So eventually, I received that spiritual awakening, and this is listen, trust me. This is listen. When I'm at the height of my career, I don't want to make this long, but listen, at the height of my career, I got, 40 million in the fight, I'm doing this, I'm going, I got boats, I got planes, I got everything. But they wouldn't touch me, a cartoon wouldn't touch me with a 1,000,000-foot pole. Now I got the #1 cartoon on television. I got an Emmy, I got a Golden Globe. This is ridiculous stuff. I don't believe this is true, but yeah, I got, I'm not perfect yet, but I'm just trying to get this stuff on track. And I'm taking, I'm sober. By being sober, I'm able to show up for my children. They're able to go to the best schools in the country. I got a daughter that graduated from first George Washington, that's in D.C. Then she went to Georgetown. Now she's in Drexel. That's Philadelphia somewhere, right? Well, she's in Drexel now. I got a daughter. My 19-year-old is in NYU. She's a director and stuff. I have this other young kid. He's trying to go to where's he trying to go? This guy, he's a character. I have an 18-year-old son that me and him, we crash. We just don't get it. Something's wrong there. I don't understand that yet. I'm gonna need some advice from some older people, but something's just not happening here. And I'm just very grateful that my kids are able to go to these schools. And sometimes they tease me because I don't spell as well as they spell. And I'm not advanced scholastically as well as they are. But I'm just happy that I'm able to put them in that position. And I just wish, and they give me a hard time because they think because I do this, they think I'm do that, they think I'm a show off. But the fact is, if they had my parents, then they would really have something to talk about. I wish he had my father, because my children, believe it or not, I have a 27. They've never received a beating before. I've received beatings just by looks. I can remember being in Royal Farms. See, they don't have Royal Farms. You guys remember Royal Farms, right? Real cheap. Just being beaten in the corner because my mother couldn't afford something. And I'm just really grateful to be here talking to you. And even though I got sucker punched being the keynote speaker at this time, I have I'm really grateful for my life now. I'm really grateful. I'm really, just by the grace of Allah, I just was able to just do this because I chose I was going to be different. I wasn't going to live that life anymore, and I was going to be the person I wanted to be. And everything I was doing in my past life, I was champ, I had money, that prevented me from being the man that I wanted to be. And I could pretty much say I'm on a course of being the person I want to be. I have dignity, I have self-respect, and anybody can just look at me and see what I'm doing. Thank you.
Talk about being behind bars and what that was like, and then what.
I'm not finished, I see. I don't believe I'm finished.
So Mike, can you just talk about your experience behind the bars, and then second, what has been the greatest source of transformation in your life for you to live a more godly life? So the first, if you could just talk about bars first.
Well, listen, you have to understand, me being behind prison is going to be a lot different than the average person being behind prison. It was not pretty, you've seen, everything on television is true, it's not, you don't see like guys walking around, everybody getting stabbed and raped because you're locked down. You don't touch nobody else. You're locked down. Everybody, it's very few people to trust you that are out. But normally you're locked down 23 hours a day. You're in that cell. And then when you go to the hole and they lock you in the hole, well, me at least, when they lock me in the hole, you're supposed to get your 1 hour of recreation. So I'm thinking I'm going to go to the yard. So they just put a cage to my cell, and they put a cage, then you come out in the cell. The cage is this big, so you just walk for an hour like this, and that's your recreation. And for me, some jails have, I guess, higher security rates. It's just not nice. People go insane. People go to hospitals. People die in prison. You never know who you're going to make it home. You may have it out there, but you just never know you're going to make it home. It's so debilitating, and nobody gets, what is the word they say when you go to jail and you get? No, there's no such thing as rehabilitation. Prison is all debilitating. There's nothing rehabilitating about that, because when you go in there, you never come out the same person again. They give you these football numbers, they give you these massive times. I think if anybody do anything over 10 or 15 years, they shouldn't allow them to come back out, because then you got a real problem coming back out. Listen, I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful I had a good life, and people liked me, and people gave me benefits and stuff, but that's not going to happen to the average guy. That's not going to happen. You know what's going to happen to him when he gets angry and he throws a tantrum like I throw my tantrum? They're going to come in the cell and they're going to beat him to death. The goon squad's coming, they're going to beat him to death. That's what's going to happen. They're going to put you in the hole. They're going to put the holes on you. They're going to beat you to death. And we're living in 2015, and all this. This is something a nation of savages would look at as something that's a disgrace. And this is what we're doing in 2015. So listen, you have to understand, if you can't prepare them from going in there, because once they're in there, I was hearing a gentleman talk about, preventing them. Once you're in there, they're going to put the whammy on you. Once you're in there, everything's going to change. You have to prevent from going there. Once you're in there, it's almost a wrap. Some guys may become more articulated, more didactic, they read the books and have, and they're very articulate with their words, but they have their demons in there working. They have their demons, and it's really hard to release those demons once you're in that place.
Mike, can you just talk about how you've changed your life, and for many of us in recovery, like my friend Gloria said, it's also the spiritual element, because this isn't about changing your mind, it's about changing your heart. And so, whether it's your love of your children, your faith, what is it that's brought about that change for you to live a more godly, holy life?
I don't know, I'm capable of living a godly life. God to me is inconceivable to live a life of God. We can only study his life and hope to be able to be in the path of God. But to live godly life is inconceivable to me. To me. I just try to do the right thing. And not necessarily the right thing is probably the best thing, but I just try to do the right thing. I try to respect everybody and treat everybody the way I want to be treated. I don't have I don't care what you're black, white, Christian, I don't care what you are. The only thing I want is respect, because I give respect. That's the only reason why I want it. And I just realized that I wanted to change my life. I didn't like the way I was living my life. I wanted a different, I just wanted a better way of life. I just didn't want to be the guy that had it all outside but had nothing inside. And I realized all this recovery and sober thing and life in general is an inside job. If you're looking for happiness from out here, it's going to be disastrous. It's going to be, from my perspective. Maybe other people can get it, and I'm different. I'm a little screwed up because I know something's wrong up there. I have a real difficult situation receiving love and happiness from the outside and stuff, but it's all an inside job. It's all an inside job. All we know about God is what people tell us about God, what our mothers, our fathers, what they tell us about God. I wasn't there when Moses split the Red Sea. I wasn't there when he got the commandments. When you look at, if you look at the internet, which we all look at, Moses didn't exist. There's no artifacts about it. But I hope that story's true.
We're going to the promised land. And I know we got our dear friend Mario here. Mario, could you stand up? And Champ, what is your favorite restaurant in Jersey City?
My favorite restaurant?
Say the White Man.
I don't know if it's the White Manor. I only eat at, cause I eat at Ringside. The White Manor, I don't eat there. They have the what's they call those hamburgers again? The sliders. I don't want to eat sliders. Some pork in there probably. I don't want the sliders. I like Ringside restaurant.
Tell them what you do with the kids at Ringside.
What I do is, we have a gym there, and we work out the kids. Everybody has the program down there, and that's where we hang out with the kids. We work there, and of course it's after school, Mario. The kids have to go to school, but we have that, and we have most of the kids. They work there as well, so they get prepared for the workplace, and they're gonna have jobs, and this is pretty awesome. And it's really sad that we live in the richest and most powerful country in the world, and we have people starving out here. You know, and they have no other choice but to commit crimes, else they're going to starve to death or have no dignity, and their wife might leave them out of shame, or the kids might not have respect for them. And I don't know, we can have a gang of these symposiums right here, but, you know, we need some action and work has to be done. All right, say something, Mayor. Go ahead, say something. Say something, Governor.
You're preaching.
Yeah, but this is just what it is. We need something. We need work to be done. We're magnificent. No one talks better than us. No one is more loquacious than we are. No one speaks better than we are. You know, because, no, listen, because I used to date somebody that was in, what's that Koresh guy? Remember he had, what's that? A Compound. You know the Compound? When I used to date a girl that was in a Compound, and I said, did y'all guys recruit blacks? Did y'all have any blacks in the Compound? And she said, oh, well, yes, we had black. They're the ones that give the best recruiting. So I said, there's nobody can talk better than us, right? But we need some action. We just need to get some action. And Jersey City is a beautiful state, and this could be a beautiful country if we stop being elites and think we're better than other people and treat everybody like brothers and sisters. And this would be a wonderful place. But that's going to be a neat trick, you know, with the kind of people that we have running our country. Would you like to say something, Mr. Governor?
Amen. That's good. Can we give a round of applause for the champ?
Thank you very much. I've always liked Jersey City. Jersey's pretty cool. It's just not Newark, though. It's Jersey City. Jersey City, Jersey City. Jersey City, baby, Jersey City. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you. Our next speaker is the chief federal law enforcement official for the state of New Jersey. He is somebody who has spoken about reentry not just this week, but long in his career, whether it was the Weed and Seed program in the great city of Trenton, and I'm proud to say our mayor from Trenton is here, the great Eric Jackson. Everybody from Mercer County clapped. But this gentleman has spearheaded one of the most progressive reentry programs of any U.S. Attorney's office in the nation. He is someone who had not only designed a program with the U.S. Attorney's Office, but also had a measurable impact upon the lives of those participants. He is fully our partner in reentry, not only in Jersey City, but in this state with our Attorney General. And he is someone who consistently understands that while law enforcement has the profound responsibility to protect and serve, service also includes reclaiming people's lives to bring them back to the fullness of civic society. There are few prosecutors, there are few U.S. attorneys, there are few persons of the decency, the integrity, and the courage to do the next right thing. Ladies and gentlemen, our U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, Paul Fishman.
Let me first thank Governor McGreevey and Mayor Fulop and everyone who works with them for putting this together and for having the vision and the foresight to recognize that the project of reentry is one that's worthy of support at the highest levels of government. And I particularly want to thank Jim for that very gracious and kind of ridiculously over the top, but when a former politician says such nice things about a prosecutor, it's always nice. In 2008, Amare Terrell, a member of a gang known as the Double I Bloods, was arrested with 8 other defendants as part of a joint federal drug investigation in Essex County. At a bail hearing in the fall of 2008, before then Magistrate Judge Madeline Arleo, he was ordered detained pending trial, held without bail. A few months later, he pled guilty to having participated in a drug distribution conspiracy. Early in 2009, he stood in a federal courtroom in Newark waiting for the judge, the district court judge, to impose sentence. The courtroom was empty, except for the usual array of people who are essential for that kind of proceeding: his lawyer, the judge, the assistant United States attorney who works in my office, the probation officer, a court reporter, a clerk, and some court security. Although it was in some ways a relatively routine proceeding for the regular players, the defendant stood quietly and listened as the judge pronounced words that would change his life forever. I sentence you to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 60 months and 4 years of supervised release. Those years of incarceration passed, and with credit for good time, Amare got out of jail and started his term of supervised release in January of 2013. In the fall of October 2014, 20 months later, the same man was once again standing in a courtroom in that same federal courthouse. A similar cast of characters was in that courtroom: a judge, some public defenders, people from my office, some people from the U.S. Probation Office, court security, and a clerk. He was again in front of Magistrate Judge Arleo, and he listened again as she again uttered words that would change his life forever. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The courtroom, this time with its spectator section completely filled, burst into applause as he kissed his new wife. There was wedding cake, and because it was a federal courtroom, alcohol-free sparkling beverages and water. How did we get there? How did we get to a place where a man like him, with his previous experience with the justice system, would be back inside of that federal courthouse again, the last place he'd want to be? Why did he and his fiancée choose as their wedding venue what had been the scene only 5 years earlier of the lowest moment of his life? Why did they pick as the person to perform the ceremony the same judge who almost 5 years earlier had ordered him detained without bail? And how did it happen that the wedding guests who were cheering and hugging the happy couple included not only their friends and the family, but me and my colleagues, U.S. Marshals, courthouse personnel, and other defendants who had recently left prison? Have they and have we walked through the looking glass? The answer is no. We have a crisis. Right now, there are about 1.5 million people in federal and state prisons, and there are hundreds of thousands of more in local jails. As an estimate, that's more than 1 in 100 adults behind bars in this country. More than 200,000 are in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and it's my job and the people who work with me in my office to put several hundred more there every year. In our judgment, those people have committed crimes for which jail is absolutely the appropriate punishment. But for almost all of them, incarceration does not and should not last forever. More than 95% of federal prisoners will be released, and when they are, the vast majority will go home, or to somewhere that they once called home. For years, they've carried with them physical or mental pictures of the places, the family, the friends they left behind. Sometimes that's what kept them going as long as they were in jail. But when they get out, home may not be what they remembered or imagined. Many come back to families that are barely intact, if they're there at all. Neighbors have moved, stores have closed and opened, kids have grown up, friends and acquaintances have disappeared or been shot or been arrested or been killed. Even the technology has changed. Maybe they've seen an iPhone on TV, but many of them have never held, much less used one. So we know when they get out of jail, or for those of you who were in jail, for when you got out of jail and you've been there for a while, the world can be an intimidating and even a forbidding place. I want to quote Mike Tyson. Many years ago, he was preparing for a bout, and he was told by a reporter that the person who was going to be boxing against him had said, "I've got a plan. How are you going to beat the champ? I've got a plan." And Mike Tyson responded, "Everybody's got plans until they get hit." And that's what it's like for people coming out of jail. They have plans. They have plans, and then they get out and they get hit with the disorientation and the realization that the world is not what they left and not what they want. For those re-entering prisoners, housing is not easy to find, jobs are tougher, it's hard enough in today's economy for people without criminal records to find work. Imagine what it's like for those who just got out of prison to compete in that environment. Then add the educational obstacles. Of the 20 fastest growing occupations in the United States, 13 require post-secondary education. But only 22% of prisoners have any post-secondary experience, compared to more than half of the rest of us. 2 in 5 prison and jail inmates, 40%, lack a high school diploma or its equivalent. And it turns out that the ability to get a job when you get out of prison is one of the greatest predictors of success on the outside. If you don't have a job and you don't have a decent place to live, the foundations that the rest of us work so hard to build and to maintain, and honestly, sometimes take for granted. Unlike us, the recently released are often alone, surrounded by people who are trying to tempt them back into bad habits and old relationships. And if you add in the fact that, as the governor knows from the work that he's doing, if you add in the fact that many may still be on the hook of an addiction, there are often too few or no alternatives to falling or just stumbling back into a life that they want to avoid if they can. So guess what? A huge number of them fail. Nationally, 2/3 of state prisoners will be rearrested again within 3 years of release. Released federal prisoners do better, partly because some of the federally released prisoners are lower-risk, white-collar offenders who are not going to go back. But for those really at risk, it's still close to 50% in the first 3 years after they get out. And that recidivism has terrible consequences for their lives and for the lives of their families. It has very serious implications for public safety. Think about it. If a father comes home and is just starting to bond with his kids and they see the wrong thing and lose him again, imagine what it does to him and to them. And you've already heard about that this morning. And with resources already severely strained at the federal, state, and local levels, it just costs too much money. The Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates that more than $74 billion is spent annually on federal, state, and local corrections. It costs nearly $30,000 a year to house a federal inmate. That's a lot of money that we could be using so much more productively. So 3 years ago, I asked people in my office and then in the rest of our court family if we could do better. I asked if collectively we had the resources, the time, the commitment. We don't have the money, just the time and the commitment to try something new, a prisoner reentry program. There were lots of others who were already running or participating in reentry programs around the country, but we had never done it in federal court in New Jersey. Those conversations and the hard work of a lot of people, including my friend Willie Torres, who I saw in the room somewhere, who's the head of the United States Federal Probation Office in the back, those conversations, the hard work of a lot of people in my office and throughout the federal court family, led to the development of the first federal reentry court in New Jersey, what we call our Project Renew. Here's how it works. We invite in person those who are leaving federal prison who are coming back to the Newark, Essex County area and are at serious risk of reoffending. This is not a program for white-collar criminals who just did 18 months in a minimum security prison. They have better foundations, largely, to which they can return. The participants in our program typically were convicted of distributing narcotics, selling and transporting firearms, and other very serious and dangerous crimes. They have served long terms in prison, in some cases as long as 14 years, and they were predicted to be some of the most likely to recidivate. What's the reward for them? They get a year shaved off the terms of their supervised release. That's like a year off parole at the end in the federal system. That's the explicit carrot. But the real attraction turns out to be the services and the attention they get. For a year after they start the program, they are closely supervised, meeting bi-weekly with the judge and the others on the team. They're supported in obtaining housing, jobs, education, counseling, and legal assistance, and they're held accountable for their nearly inevitable mistakes as they work against daunting obstacles and long-established patterns. In this program, they voluntarily come to the Martin Luther King Courthouse every other Tuesday at 5 o'clock. At first, it looks like a lot of other proceedings. Judge Madeline Cox Arleo sits on the bench. In the well of the courtroom, at the tables usually occupied by lawyers and clients, there are a couple of lawyers from the Federal Public Defender's Office, a few people from my office, and at least 1 or 2 probation officers. And the participants, there are currently about 18, sit on the benches in the back, usually occupied by the public and the press. One at a time, Judge Aurelio invites each of them by name to sit at counsel table with the probation officers. "How is your daughter?" she asks one. "Tell me about your new apartment," she inquires of another. "Can we help you print your resume? Do you need some help from Ricky Hawkins, the legal assistant in my office, who's a night law student, who's tutoring 3 of these guys in math? Do you want a lawyer to help you get a payment plan so we can get your driver's license back? Do you have to leave early today to get to work or to class? And finally, is there anything else we can do? What else do you need?" And in between those court sessions, members of my office and court personnel are editing their resumes, teaching them how to interview for a job, and as I said, tutoring them in math and other stuff. The judge has helped them register for college, find apartments, and get jobs. She literally took one guy and his kid to enroll in a charter school down the block from the federal courthouse in Newark. Often, as you might imagine, the participants start with great skepticism, wariness, and suspicion. And maybe not surprisingly, we weren't quite sure what to expect either. Remember, the last time those defendants were in a federal courtroom, people from my office were asking a judge sitting on the same bench to send them to prison for a pretty long period of time. The last time they were in that courthouse, a federal judge was explaining to those defendants why the things that they had done and the crimes they committed required that they receive a meaningful period of incarceration. So because of those challenges, it's not always smooth sailing, especially at the beginning. These guys have to work long hours in difficult jobs, sometimes more than one. They're pursuing educational opportunities that would be challenging for many of us, especially for them, and other programs to make progress. Some have family members who are just not that supportive. Others have family members who are incredibly needy. And others have the wrong friends who just want to reunite with their old running buddies. Some just aren't quite ready to turn away from their previous lives. And so, like everybody else, some of our participants make mistakes. There are excuses and impediments and apologies. Sometimes it's not unlike the stuff I hear from my 13-year-old son. And there are sanctions. Some have to stay in the program for longer, losing some credit. Some end up being directed to do some community service, and others get some additional house arrest. But all of those sanctions, slowly and gently graduated, are geared not towards punishment, but toward getting those individuals back on their feet, ready and able to make it. And every 2 weeks, they come back and remind us why this work is so important, and they impress us with their ability to evolve and to persevere. None of it would work if the participants were not committed. Because we all know, everybody in this room knows, it's not just enough to provide the right services. We have to provide them in the right place at the right time. Former offenders are at a unique crossroad. They are poised either to become law-abiding citizens, contributors to our communities, or to become frequent flyers in the criminal justice system. They need to know that the path of redemption is theirs to choose, and they will be supported in that journey and their decision to leave what is familiar and trade it for the prospect of something that's a little scary but promises a better future. Last July, the first 6 of our participants graduated, and some of you, including Governor McGreevey and others in this room, were there. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But now that our reentry court has been up and running for 2 years, we're starting to do more. First, we're starting to think about how to scale it up. It takes a lot of attention from a lot of people to help just those 18 people in the program. And so we're now trying to figure out how we can increase our capacity. We're in conversations with service providers and Rutgers University to try to do that with various folks who can help us out. Now that we're up and running in Newark, we're expanding into our federal courthouse in Camden. That program will start next month in May. And once that works, yes, for those of you from Camden, and once that works, it's onto the federal courthouse in Trenton. But that will take time. With my friend, acting New Jersey Attorney General John Hoffman, I've started a reentry council to bring together everybody in the state and federal system who are working on these issues so that we can learn from each other and leverage what we know and what we're doing so we can have better access to services and learn from our success and our failures. And also something that's really cool, there are 93 United States attorneys in the country, running different districts all over the country. The 93 of us will gather the first week in May for our annual conference of United States attorneys in Washington. It's a 3.5-day conference. We're going to spend a half a day on cybercrime and a half a day on national security issues, a host of other things that we deal with as the chief federal law enforcement officers in our districts. Real, serious problems of crime enforcement. But we're spending the last afternoon and the last morning, an entire day of our conference, just talking about reentry. And that is a tribute not just to my 93 colleagues, but really to the leadership of my boss and my friend, the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, who has made this a huge priority for me and for my colleagues around the country. So how are we doing in New Jersey? How are our graduates doing? Well, last July, we graduated the first 6, and I can say, without fear of contradiction, and I assume that Mikey Sherrill from my office and Matt Riley from my office were there, and Governor McGeevy will agree, it was the most moving 2 hours I have ever spent in a federal courtroom. Chief Judge Simandl came up from Camden to preside. Judge Arleo sat next to him on the bench. The courtroom was filled with the participants in the reentry court, their families, people from every part of the court family, and members of the public and the press. After a few speeches, including one by me and by Willie Torres, the head of probation, the probation officer who supervises each of our participants stood at counsel table in the middle of the court, and for each of the graduating participants made a formal motion in front of the chief judge to reduce their terms of supervised release by a year. That, as I said, was the official carrot of the program. For each, the probation officer recited his or her progress. There was one woman, so one her, our only one so far in the program. And what that person had achieved since leaving prison. Each description was a triumph. And after each one, Judge Arleo added her own impressions and then recommended that the application be granted, which the chief judge then did. And then, in what was, at least for me, completely unexpected and unscripted, the first guy got up to the microphone. And then each of them, because I think they felt a little peer pressure, which is what this group dynamic does to make them hold together and do better, each of the graduates spoke to this very full courtroom of lawyers and judges and members of the press and their families. And each one was articulate and moving and profound and filled with gratitude. And let me tell you, almost all of them today, 9 months later, are still employed. One of them the guy who got married, just bought a house in Union County. His son is moving in with him, his adult son is moving in with him. And many of them, 2 weeks from yesterday, will write a check to the Internal Revenue Service of the United States government. Instead of costing $30,000 a year, they're paying their taxes. That's an unbelievable thing. One evening, there was one of the participants told a story as he stood up, and this is where I will leave you. This fellow told a story that one evening after court, during the winter, it was dark, and one of the participants was invited back to the Federal Public Defender's office so he could get some sheets and towels or curtains, I don't remember which, linens, that this assistant federal public defender was no longer needed in her house and wanted to give to him for his new apartment. It was a lot to carry all the way from her office to his car. His car was 4 or 5 blocks away. So maybe, without thinking too much about it, she offered him a ride. The graduate was emotional when he described what that offer meant to him. After all, she knew everything about him. She'd read his pre-sentence report when he got into the program. She knew what his life was like as a kid. She knew what he'd been convicted of. She knew what he was capable of. Everyone who works in the program knew everything about him. She knew about his past, his conviction, his membership in the Bloods, which is a seriously violent street gang, as you all know. He knew that there was a time in his life when she would have been petrified, legitimately petrified, to be around him by herself. But here she was, inviting him into her car for the 4 or 5 block drive to his. He said he knew then that he had turned a profound corner, that his life had really changed because she trusted him. All of the participants in our reentry court certainly had good reason to believe that we would never trust them. And to be fair, many of the participants never imagined that they could trust us, people in federal law enforcement and a federal judge. But over time, it became clear to them that what we want as a matter of good moral character and as a matter, honestly, of public safety and common sense is for all of them to succeed. We are stronger and we are safer if they do. And for us, it became clear that they want exactly the same thing for themselves, to reimagine their lives and take responsibility for making it real. This is an exciting time for those of us who are in law enforcement. Just like the participants in our program, we are re-examining our own roles and responsibilities. We are thinking hard about who and how we charge. We're reevaluating who goes to jail and for how long. And we're using new tools and new ideas to make streets and neighborhoods safer. We are seizing the opportunity to reimagine what effective law enforcement looks like in the 21st century. I can't tell you what a privilege it is to be part of that and to have the opportunity to share that excitement with all of you. As we enter the season of redemption for my faith and for the governor's, as we enter the season of Passover and Easter, the time of redemption and second chances, it is a more than appropriate time to have this discussion. And I thank everybody in this room for your commitment to what we do.
And Father is not only a priest, but he's also a journalist, and he's been really supportive of what we've been doing here and in terms of prison reentry and outreach in the community, in terms of speaking to social justice. So I'd ask Father to conclude today. So with that, my dear friend, Father Alex.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. In case you didn't see today's Jersey Journal, Jim wrote a beautiful piece anchoring this experience today in the context of Easter and Passover. So I urge you, if you haven't gotten it, go online and read it. It's a wonderful piece. And, you know, this morning when Reverend Gloria Walton was speaking, she said she doesn't just want to do this, she feels ordained to do the work she does. And I certainly think Jim has been ordained to change lives, and he has single-handedly made the difference here in Hudson County. Let's thank him for everything that he's done.
Amen. Thank you very much for being here. May God bless you.